I will wait. I will wait.
Decided the characters were too sharp dressed looking. You needed to make some gray sweatpants for everybody.
Did you see my paddling sweatpants, Grace? It'll be like your old wrestling days.
Oh, that's just like them.
Yeah, you could go like grab some kid's balls or whatever you guys used to do.
I don't-
grind your face into someone's taint.
well, have you seen the binging suits that the BDP boys make?
The who?
the BDP boys.
BDP boys. I'm not down with that tribe or posse.
You are like Griff and Eric Johnson, and Griff sews these suits. They're like baggy uni suits sewed out of with like a big front zip and like some sort of like animal fur like dick flap. And have you seen those? they're all the rage around Hood River.
Welcome to Hammer Factor number 22.
Hey Grace, I can't. Your camera isn't live, by the way.
We went ahead and gave you a little taste there of what you can see on the Hammer, or what happens on the Hammer Factor before we start recording. So anyway, that's going on the show, guys.
So so we're gonna do that. So who's the BDP crew? What's BDP stand for?
Balls Deep Productions.
Balls Deep Productions.
Oh, Balls Deep. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. I guess I did know BDP. Should I be concerned about them as a up and coming gear concern?
Maybe.
I mean, I feel like the union suits have really come into their own, man. Engine suits.
Yeah, I've seen those. They started. We saw those. You old schools remember these Boofwear? Remember Boofwear from Colorado?
Yeah,
they were one-piece fleece suits, and
these
then
are way stylier.
And then there was a guy in Buena Vista making these pajama-like one-piece suits, super baggy.
There are listeners hanging
BDP.
up on us right now. So
yeah, all right.
Yeah. So whatever suits of the ticket.
welcome to Hammer Factor 22. My name is John Grace. On the line, we have North Fork champion, policy counsel for the Outdoor Alliance, and poker superstar, Louis Geltman. Welcome back from Washington, D.C.
Thanks, Grace. Good to be home. Back here amongst real Americans.
Yes, indeed. And then also on the line, we have Whitewater legend, co-owner of Immersion Research, and all-around nice guy, John Weld. What's up, buddy?
Yes. Not much. I'm doing great. Once again, if people could hear the 20 minutes before the show starts, it was pretty ribald this time round.
Yeah. Yeah, not recording missing a few days. So I got to tell you guys, we got some death threats for not coming through on our weekly podcast. Not actual death threats, but definitely I'm getting personal texts on my phone. People are coming through. There was like a mime of somebody like with a needle up against their arm being like, where's my hair?
You're going to have like a horse head in your bed tomorrow.
Yeah. As long as that all stays directed at John Grace, I'm honored.
Right.
All right. New policy here at the Hammer Factor: direct your calls and questions to Louis Geltman. Louis Geltman.
Don't do that to me.
We're gonna do the month of Louis. Louis, what was going on in D.C.? How was Mitch McConnell? You guys there?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know what just happened there, but every time I ever say something about Mitch McConnell, my thing freezes up.
Yes.
So anyway,
You gotta get the CGN, dude. They're listening.
Seriously, we were just talking about this before we came on. Something's going on here.
Right.
And anyway, you were in D.C. and full disclosure here, I just think Mitch is an interesting guy. Like, just when I see him on television, I don't know what it is. It's just like he's the most interesting. So you saw him.
I saw him. Yeah, he walked by.
Were you totally starstruck?
Starstruck's the wrong word.
Filled with loathing?
I just think his character, he can't be like that guy all the time. He's got to like put on a different character, don't you think?
He is perplexing. I'll give you that.
Yeah, you can't say anything about this, Lewis. So anyway, how was your trip in DC? Tell me what you were doing. What's going on? Tell me about it.
It was good. Outdoor Industry Association, who is the trade group representing the outdoor industry, great partners of ours, do good work on public land stuff. And then also they have a whole big trade agenda. They have their annual gathering in DC. It's called their Capital Summit. And they have, I don't know, like 100 some executives from outdoor industry brands, like the kind of companies you would see at Outdoor Retailer in town lobbying on like trade and public land stuff. And they had some
trade. Like when you say trade, what do you mean by trade?
It's like so far over my head. I know nothing about it, but things like the border adjustment tax and like
that's what I thought. That's interesting. Which they're obviously against.
I think so.
They would have to be.
I know so little about it, but
they would have to be. The border adjustment tax is going to be basically a huge penalty for retailers and manufacturers alike in our industry. Should I explain the border adjustment tax in a nutshell?
I mean, I'd be interested. I don't know if anybody else is.
What do you think, Grace?
Yeah. Let's hear it. Let's explain that, and then let's explain exactly what lobbying is. But go with the tax first, Will.
The tax?
Yeah.
Okay. Basically, Republicans, Donald Trump, they've sort of produced a wish list of things of tax cuts they want to make, and basically, who said it is they said it was like a Christmas wish list for Newt Gingrich when he was 12. It was just a bunch of things, and there's no, I think Lewis, there's no clear way how they're going to pay for all this stuff, right?
Again, I'm like, I do no work on the trade stuff at all, and I have no understanding.
I mean, to clarify even further, Trump produced a budget, which presidents do, and and Trump's not the only one who produces a very ambitious budget that gets immediately ratified and adjusted and completely changed around by Congress, and every president does that. So Trump's budget, like the rest of them, are sort of an outline of what he wants to accomplish. It's very expensive. One of the ways that Republicans have been suggesting a way to fix this that sort of goes in line with Trump's nationalist agenda is something called a border adjustment tax, which means that it's really quite complicated. It has to do with some economic theory, but the long and short of it is that companies like IR, we could not, if we bought things from overseas, normally, the cost of those products when we sell them, we can take them off our income. It's like an expense. The cost of goods sold from a dry suit we buy from overseas comes off of our taxable income, right? Under a border adjustment tax, we'd not be able to do that. Things we made overseas would be we'd have to declare, we wouldn't be able to take those off our income. So if we sold, let's say we sold $1,000 worth of dry suits in the United States last year, and it cost us $500 to buy those suits, the way it works now is that we made $1,000, we take $500 off of the cost of goods sold, so our profit was $500, right? Under this arrangement, the cost of goods sold would not come off, so we'd pay tax on the full $1,000. The flip side of that is that any garments that we sold to overseas, to like to England, for instance, which we do a lot of business, we would not have to pay any tax on those. There'd be no tax on those. So it'd be the other way around, encouraging us to export, things and try and buy things from inside this country. The immediate result, and this would increase our tax liability enormously. We'd pay. I did the math really quick in the back of a piece of paper one day, but we were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars more a year in taxes, which we simply cannot afford. I think the way it would resolve itself would be that we would have to do something really drastic, like sell direct, to not have our prices of dry suits and things overseas go to like $1,800 or $1,900 for a dry suit, or $700 or $800 for a dry top. Economists say that the way that this would resolve itself would be that the price of the dollar would get stronger against the currencies that we're trading with. So we would end up paying less for the garments we buy overseas, but that's a theoretical concern. I know what's going to happen with our factory that we deal with, and I think every other factory that our industry deals with, at least, is that we pay $250 for $300 for a dry suit, or whatever we pay for a dry suit right now, they're not going to care what the border adjustment tax is. We're going to pay exactly the same amount. And then we're going to have a huge liability in our hands. It would be manufacturers would have to scramble to become as efficient as possible, which would mean probably moving to a direct sales model of some sort. Otherwise, the price of our stuff would double, or very close to double. It'd be a very, very, very crazy situation for sure, with a lot of manufacturers panicked about what's happening to the cost of their products. And
it seems crazy to me that, it seems like getting something, when you're purchasing something that you're then going to resell, it's hard for me to understand how that could not be considered a business expense. It's like, it's hard to.
You have to read into the theory of it. The theory of it is that it's pushing the tax onto the consumer country. And so that's kind of the theoretical idea behind it, sort of an academic argument. But the immediate practice of it is that if you make stuff overseas, or if you manufacture stuff overseas, you're going to get punished right away. With the hope that the dollar is going to, the currency adjustment is going to help pay for that later on, but that's unclear, and no one's going to wait around.
It seems like. And if that happened, if the dollar got really strong, wouldn't it just make it that much harder to export things?
Right. You're getting into more. That's a good point. You're getting into more of the theoretical aspect of economics. We should probably have someone. If there's a listener out there who's an economist who understands, this at a deeper level, let me know. But I'm certain that the outdoor industry is fighting this tooth and nail. It looks like, for right now, the border adjustment tax is taken off the table. But it would produce billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of revenue if they were to do it, and it worked according to the plan.
In the short
to their plan. Well, if they kept doing it, it'd continue to produce revenue.
But doesn't that open the can of worms to other countries to do the same thing, and it just start getting into the trade war kind of thing, or am I just
it's the border adjustment tax is different than a tariff. It's not like we're slapping a tariff on a class of goods. So it has a different effect than that. At this point, I would probably defer to economists to explain the difference between those two things more thoroughly. But
maybe we should get OIA's trade guy to come on and explain it.
That would be great.
That'd be actually
because
really good insight.
The thing is this is a real thing. This is not kookiness, and there's many Republicans who are talking about doing this. This is a serious thing on the table. And if it happens, it's going to have a big effect on the price of outdoor gear.
Interesting.
So, anyway.
So there was some lobbying going on, and you hear this term thrown around all the time. So what exactly were you doing that was the lobby?
So we'd have a group, and the groups are kind of broken down by either subject matter, some people are just working on their trade agenda or on public land stuff. But for me, it was me and about half a dozen folks from the Pacific Northwest, somebody who works in government relations for REI, someone who runs Hydro Flask as a water bottle manufacturer in Bend, some folks from the Mazamas Mountaineering Club, one of our members who's based in Portland, and we would just kind of go in and visit with lawmakers or their staff from around the Pacific Northwest and talk about the issues that are important for keeping these outdoor recreation businesses healthy or protecting public lands or whatever. And so you just go in there and you say, hey, this is we have this new outdoor recreation report or outdoor recreation economy report out from OIA. Let us walk you through this, explain why, our industry is important, why you need to be kind of looking out for us. Here are some things that we're worried about, like the border adjustment tax or keeping public lands public, and just kind of, sharing what the concerns of our community are. It's pretty fun, people are pretty interested to hear from us. We're definitely a more fun group, I think, than people going into lobby on healthcare or something like that.
Are you slipping them a Benji under the table and stuff, or?
No, nothing like that. But it's a good point. It's I think that sort of the idea of lobbying gets kind of vilified, or lobbyists get vilified, and to me it's even ExxonMobil, it's like there's nothing intrinsically wrong with someone, a business that works in a highly regulated space, having someone who's a professional and could go in and explain, the impacts of these like pretty technical pieces of legislation to their business or to their community or whatever. It's like where it gets shady is when it's coupled with this like horrific system of campaign finance we have, and all of a sudden these lawmakers see that they're sort of financial ability to participate in elections is contingent on doing what these people want. Like, to me, that's the problem. It's not the idea that somebody goes in and lobbies for their interests or their community's interests. And it's something that's like, there's a lot of opportunities out there for anyone to do it. Like, if that's something that you're really interested in doing, you can go to DC and, maybe schedule a meeting and just go chat with your member of Congress. It's like, it's that simple. And if you're, involved in an organization like American Whitewater Outdoor Alliance and you're, volunteering and working on things, like, great, if you ever wanted to like come to DC and, talk about forest planning in the Nanahail Pisgah or something like that, like, we could help you schedule some meetings and go in and talk about that stuff. It's
cool. I'm not sure they'd know what to think of me, but I'd give it a go.
Man, they would, it's like, seriously, it's like, it's, when you go in and you're a normal person and you're representing, things that there's other people who share your interests. And if you're able to say, hey, like, I organize this race every year that, a couple hundred people show up at, I organize events all over the Southeast. Like, I'm a leader in my community. And like, this is what, is concerning to us right now. Like, people listen. I mean, you might not get your way, but
I'd like to discuss paddling with my representatives.
I'd like that.
Just getting some kind of legislation in the pipeline regarding people and paddle lengths.
We did get some viewer mail on paddle lengths and some viewer mail on SUP, but we're not going to cover either of those this week. So
excellent.
All right.
So what was the consensus, Lewis?
Nice.
What's the takeaway? We got really drunk.
I don't know.
Did you fix the outdoors or not?
We're going to make it great again.
Yes
Josh.
or no?
I think that those big like fly-in kind of meetings where you have a bunch of people who are sort of new to doing that, and like a bunch of like business executives, it's good just for kind of making an impression. And it's hard to really like get into the weeds on policy stuff in this kind of meetings. They end up being really big, and people aren't super well versed in the issues, but I think it's really important, like, laying groundwork so like I can go back in and talk to those offices, in a week.
Is there bagels or something, or donuts, or what do they have? Is there snacks?
Not in the congressional offices usually.
No,
coffee,
Panera, nothing
coffee,
like that.
Right?
Coffee, water,
Boring. They fly you out business class, or they fly you out coach?
Coach, man, I work for a nonprofit.
All right. Okay. Just checking.
So
Right
I'm
answer.
sure this economic report that we discussed last week was thrown all around. What were there any thoughts on that? Did anybody?
There was actually.
Go ahead.
There was a hearing about it, actually, that was kind of interesting. There was just like a bunch of folks up at the front of the room testifying and just sort of talking about the economic impact of outdoor recreation. And I'm trying to think who was testifying. A guy from REI, the head of the Outdoor Industry Association, Jeremy Jones was there talking about climate. That was pretty cool. Guy from the RV Manufacturers Association.
The RV Manufacturers Association.
Yeah, I can't remember what they're actually called, but something like that.
Wow, what a cool world, Lewis. You got a cool job, man.
Yeah, not too bad. Going back next week, actually, to go. We're doing kind of a similar thing with the climbers. So we have a bunch of like famous pro climbers coming in to go lobby. It's like Alex Honnold and Tommy Caldwell and Conrad Anker and Sasha DeJulian.
Are you going out for that one?
I am.
Oh,
back to DC on Monday.
We'll get another report. Dude, this is my favorite part of is just hearing about you in Washington D.C. Man, it's such a different world.
Thanks, man. I feel like it's kind of I don't really do a good job of making it interesting, but I'm glad you're.
I'm interested. Who cares about everybody else?
Hey, we should do our guest.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's gonna be long.
because he's a busy guy. I've been
So,
busting my butt to try and get this guy lined up, so I don't want to miss him.
so our guest is Brent Wiesel. What can you tell us about Brent, John?
Dr. Brent Wiesel, that's his real name.
Okay.
He's a Gelman, you know better than I do. He was a slalom paddler. He was pretty good,
Yeah,
right?
Brent was like 5 years older than me. He was kind of one of my slalom racing gurus when I was growing up. He was kind of like national B team level, junior team level. Hurt his shoulder, eventually stopped racing, went to med school, and I think he's the head of sports medicine now at Georgetown, and just like super legit shoulder surgeon. So I think it'll be sweet to have him on and just kind of talk about shoulder injuries and paddling and dispel some myths. Brent and I went to the same high school and the same college, and now he is the head of sports medicine at Georgetown, and I am 1/3 caretaker of a podcast where we rip on SUP.
You guys rip on SUP.
See, he got out of paddling. That was the thing that he did.
All right, here we go. I'm going to try and see if we can get Brent on here. He never looked back. You're right. That's what he did. He was just like,
I'm trying to get my kids involved with tennis or golf or something besides paddling.
I think golf is the one. A lot of longevity.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Brent.
How are you?
Hey, Brent. Welcome to the Hammer Factor. You are on the line with John Grace, Lewis Geltman, and John Weld. How are you?
Great.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Brent. So we kind of introduced you a little bit, and you are, correct me if I'm wrong, an orthopedic surgeon at Georgetown. And
That's right.
What do you do there? What does that mean?
I am a shoulder surgeon, so I basically just take care of shoulders.
Okay.
And a paddler. Good paddler. Brent and I did a trip to Mexico years and years ago. Some pretty serious whitewater. Do you still paddle, Brent? You still get out?
A little bit here and there. We live right at the top of the feeder canal in D.C., so I paddle a couple times a year. But I've known John for about 20 years, I guess.
A bit, yeah. Yeah, you raced with my wife a bunch.
Yeah, and Lewis was a couple of years behind me in slalom racing. So I used to coach him. He used to sneak into my house and steal one of my roommate's porn magazines so he could look at them in the living room.
That wasn't stealing. That was a whole lending library that you guys had. Porno mags in the living room.
I don't know anything about that.
Well, while we're on this topic, I also had an old ID of Brent's that was my fake ID the entire way through college.
I kind of remember that. All right, so let's get into this. So the idea is to talk about kayaking and shoulder injuries, and I want to kick things off by asking you a question about a statement that Eric Martin told me once. Eric Martin's a friend of ours who kayaks, who runs a rafting company, High Up Pile, but he said that if you kayak long enough, sooner or later you're going to screw up your shoulders. True or false?
I don't. You would think that's true. I mean, it's certainly hard on the shoulders, but there's plenty of people that kayak for a real long time and don't have any problems with the shoulders. So, it's not inevitable, but fairly likely, I would say.
What goes wrong? What happens?
So, I mean, there's sort of two things that we see. So in the younger patients, and by that I mean anybody under probably 50, we'll see a lot of people will dislocate their shoulders, which is the most common thing you're going to see with paddling. Certainly happened to a lot of slalom racers, myself included. That's sort of the end of my slalom racing career. That's pretty straightforward and pretty easy to imagine why that happens, just because you're putting your arm sort of up over your head and sometimes in an uncontrolled situation, and that's the position that makes you dislocate, and that certainly is the most common kayaking injury that you see. Then as you get older, actually that becomes much less common. So once you're over about 50, really in normal everyday people, once you're over 30 or 35, it's very rare to dislocate your shoulder. Paddlers.
Interesting. I never knew that was a young guy thing. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a young guy thing, and it's actually, unfortunately, the one time where it's bad to be young. So most of the time when people come in with an injury, it's the results in young people are always better. So shoulder dislocation is the one time where the younger you dislocate, the worse it is. So if you're under 20 and you dislocate, there's somewhere between an 80 and a 95% chance it's going to happen again. And then each time it happens, it becomes easier. And certainly if you're a paddler and you're, going back to those same situations, it's highly likely that it's going to continue to be a problem. Whereas if you're over the age of 40, it's less than a 10% chance that you dislocate again. So this the one case where being young is actually not a good thing. So as you start to get a little bit older, the shoulder actually gets a little bit stiffer, and that's why it's less common to happen again. What we see in a lot of people when they get older is rotator cuff problems or arthritis. And intuitively, I would have thought I would be seeing a lot of people that I used to kayak with in the office for arthritis. But it really hasn't played out. There's not it's not, I would say, any more common to really get arthritis in the shoulder in people that do a whole lot of kayaking than just everyday people. Because it's not something like powerlifting, where you're putting a lot of load on the joint. So if you don't dislocate, you're probably okay from the point of view of the shoulder.
What's arthritis exactly? What causes it?
So arthritis is when you wear out the cartilage that lines the joint. And so, you think of it typically in the hips and the knees because you walk on that. We see it a fair bit in the shoulder. And, just like a hip or a knee, you treat it with a shoulder replacement. Given the amount of use you put on them, you would think you'd see it more in paddlers. But I guess there's not enough sort of compressive load for that to be so much of a problem. I mean, there's certainly some paddlers out there with some arthritis, but not nearly as many as I would have thought. Now, there is a different subset that if you have instability of the shoulder, I mean, you dislocate your shoulder sometime in your 20s, and it continues to sort of frequently come out or come part of the way out, that in and of itself will cause arthritis. And those people are sort of in a separate boat.
Interesting. So, well, go ahead, Galvin. I can see a question forming on your.
I was thinking it would be good to maybe just talk for a sec about it. I feel like so often I see people who are like, oh, my shoulder came out today and it's back in now. And they're like, oh, I'm just going to, like they don't have their arm in a sling. They're like just kind of walking around. They're like, yeah, I'm going to go paddle again in like 3 days. So like, I feel like it might be good information for people to kind of understand how they should be thinking about things. Like if they sublux or dislocate their shoulder.
Right. And it depends on how often it's happened. Certainly the first time you feel that your shoulder really comes out of place. And obviously there comes, there's two types of instability that can happen in the shoulder. It can come partially out of place and you can go back in, and we call that a subluxation. Or it can come all the way out of place to the point where you've got to have somebody else put it back in. And, typically that somebody else is a doctor in the emergency room. If obviously if you're out somewhere on the river, especially with the amount of shoulder instability you see, somebody inevitably knows or thinks they know how to put a shoulder back in. And so most of the time in paddlers, it ends up going back in. And then it's always a little bit of a gray area because you've never seen an x-ray to truly document that it was all the way out. And, it can, sometimes it'll feel like the shoulder comes out of place and it doesn't necessarily come out of place. But certainly the first time somebody dislocates their shoulder, they want to see that's one that indicates going to see an orthopedist. You want to get an x-ray and make sure you didn't break anything, because if you do break the bone, it makes it much more likely to come out again. And then in terms of going back to paddling,
we're laughing, Wiesel, because Grace is just writhing in imagined pain right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brent. I'm just like squirming, man. Anyway, continue. This is really interesting. Sorry.
Well, so the one thing I will say, if you are out on the river and somebody dislocates their shoulder, it's a little bit like when somebody dislocates on the football field, in the sense that that's the one time when we can get it back in within about 3 or 4 minutes. So once it's been out for more than a couple minutes, all the muscles spasm, very hard to get it back in. But if immediately when it dislocates, it'll actually slide back in relatively easily. And, you can sort of think about it like Caddyshack. The ball wants to go in its home. So you just need to kind of
Happy Gilmore, bud.
Pull on. Happy Gilmore, sorry.
Yeah. Don't mess with golf movie references with Geltman. He's very serious about that. I mean, how hard is it to put someone's shoulder back? I mean, what kind of knowledge do you need? And is someone likely to really screw things up if they start monkeying around in there?
Not a lot. I mean, as long as you sort of pull on it gently, and just
like which way? Like how do you
pull the arm?
How do you pull on that thing?
So you want to grab the arm just below the shoulder, and sort of pull it away from the body. It's we call putting traction on it. And if you put traction on it, almost any joint will want to slide back where it's supposed to go.
Like which way are you pulling it? Like are you standing on their chest? Like if they're laying on their back, are you standing on their chest and pulling up, or are you pulling?
If you got to pull that hard, then it's not going to go back in. You really just want to.
I'm trying to get a visualization of which direction you're pulling.
Yeah, so you get them lying on their back, and you
anterior.
You want to just pull gently anteriorly and then let it slide. Because typically at anterior dislocation, you want to just let it slide back and into the socket. You really just
anteriorly
trying to pull that arm.
You're going like you're
going slightly
like
forward and away from their body, away from their chest. So you got your arm, you got your hand kind of in their armpit, and you're pulling away from their chest.
Okay.
And so that is something that's worth doing because you're in the middle of the upper yoke. It's a long walk out of there, especially with one arm.
I've done this probably a half dozen times on the side of the river, and it's never made me queasy. But sitting here talking about it, I feel like I'm going to have to step away for a second.
I subluxed my shoulder years ago in Mexico, but it went out and went back in, and I never looked back. I kept hammering.
So let's say
right, and you're in that. I mean, so you're in the minority there. You're in the lucky group.
Story of my life.
And but I think I was around when that happened, and you were older. I mean, you were in your 30s, maybe.
So this was 1993, 94. So I was probably 55. No, I had to have been in my 20s, mid 20s.
But I mean, you weren't 15. Yeah.
No, definitely not 15.
But so back to Lewis's question. If you dislocate before you go back to paddle, really what determines when you're ready is when you've got the strength and the coordination back of all the muscles that help hold the shoulder in place. Because except at the very extreme ends of motion, it's not the ligaments, which are the connective tissue around the shoulder, which is where we actually fix when we do surgery. It's not the ligaments that make the difference; it's the muscles. And so if you don't have that muscle coordination, you're almost definitely going to come out again. And every time you come out, you do more damage. So it's definitely not one of these things where you want to run right back into it until you really feel strong again. Now that can be in as short as 2 or 3 days, but it can be longer than that. It just depends on the person, and it depends on the time. The first time it generally takes a little bit longer.
So let's assume you've never hurt. Let's assume you've never hurt your shoulder before.
Yep.
Shoulders. What can you do? What exercises? What can you do to, make it less likely you're going to dislocate your shoulder or get hurt?
So I mean, what you can do is you can strengthen up the rotator cuff muscles that help stabilize the shoulder and keep the ball in the socket, which is essentially what we do both in people that we're treating without surgery and after surgery. And the best way to do that is go on the internet and look for a rotator cuff strengthening program. Should be something that involves TheraBands, so the stretchy rubber bands.
Right.
It's going to be, they're very simple exercises. They take about 2 or 3 minutes to do. And, if you do a lot of paddling, it's something you probably ought to be doing at least 3 or 4 times a week, if not every day.
You once told me this is like doing dental floss. It's like dental floss for your shoulder.
Yeah, it's like brushing your teeth for the shoulder. So, I mean, for me, towards the end of my racing career, I was having enough problems with both shoulders that I couldn't paddle without doing them.
What happened to you? What was wrong with your shoulders?
So I dislocated one shoulder, the one I eventually had surgery on in a race, and then the other one I actually tore something called the superior labrum while surfing in the ocean in a kayak.
Well, that's your problem.
Similar sort of problem, so it's a little bit.
Should be surfing in a kayak.
Oh man.
So Brent, pardon, I don't want to interrupt you here, but I've had a lot of success with free weights, with like doing military press type exercises with dumbbells, and I've recommended that to a lot of people who have not had a lot of success with the TheraBands, and I've just felt like all those little balance muscles from putting that over your head really help. Am I leading them in the wrong direction when I recommend that?
Unfortunately, I would probably say yeah. I mean,
surprise, surprise! John Gray's giving bad advice.
I mean, I've given that to advice at least to 20 different people, but my shoulders have always been fine, so I just attribute it to that exercise.
There's an orthopedic surgeon Ash just wondering what the hell's going on with all these paddles.
You're putting somebody's kids through college. If there's one exercise that the shoulder's really biomechanically not designed to do, it's actually military press. So it does not do real well pushing weight away from the body overhead. It's not such an issue with instability, but it's definitely an issue with people as they start to get problems with their rotator cuff once they get a little bit older. In your case, probably because you've never had a shoulder, you really haven't ever had a shoulder issue. Your shoulders are strong, they work well, and so that's why it hadn't been a problem for you, and it's okay. But again, it's sort of what John was saying before. The rubber band exercises that don't feel like you're doing a whole hell of a lot is like brushing your teeth. Building the bigger muscles around the shoulders is a little bit like eating dinner. So if you go to the dentist and the dentist says you brush your teeth, you say, well, I eat dinner, every night. It's similar difference.
I'm not buying it.
Fake news.
It's working so far. Keep doing
That's an alternative fact right there. If I've ever heard one.
I'm just kidding. I'm just fully kidding. That is. You learn something new every day. Awesome.
So, can we talk about? I know this is probably out of your specialty, but can we talk about back injuries real quick? I mean, you could probably illuminate some of the issues here. There's a whole generation of paddlers now running really, really tall waterfalls. And what do you think that's going to lead to orthopedic issues down the road?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I asked Lewis this question. I saw him last weekend. I asked him, these guys are running stuff that certainly, when I was paddling, you sort of considered anything over 40 feet to be, once you went past that, whether you got hurt or not was completely up in the air. I mean, I think Corn Addison was the first one to run something about 70 feet, and he broke 2 vertebrae in his back when he did it. And so guys seem to be doing it without any problems. I think they are likely going to have problems as they get older. I mean, I can tell you from some of the people that I have paddled with, they've had some back issues, and when we get x-rays of their back, you'll see some old compression fractures in there. And most of the time when you ask them about it, they're like, oh yeah, I went over Ohio Pile Falls and I landed, totally flat boof. And, that's not a very big drop, in the spectrum of what people are doing now. Say, yeah, my back hurt a whole lot for about 3 weeks. I could barely walk. Well, when that type of stuff happens, you probably are damaging things. And so, those are definitely going to be issues as you get older. None of that stuff gets better as you start to get older.
Well, let me
but
say.
my impression.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, let me say
my impression. You first.
Okay, let me say, while there are a lot of people running a lot of waterfalls, let me just say Jason Hale has broke his back. Rush Sturgis has broke his back. Isaac Levinson has broke his back. Joe Morley just broke his back. The list can kind of go on. So anyway, I just want to – there was a comment that people weren't breaking their backs, but it's happening.
Broken back is the new dislocated shoulder.
Yeah.
That's like a badge of honor now.
Yeah, it's way trendier. Shoulder injuries are super old school. If you want to be with the times, you got to break your back.
Well, I mean, what I was going to say was I'm frankly amazed when I see what these guys are doing that they're not getting hurt. So it sounds like maybe some of them are getting hurt.
Man, should we talk about my shoulder woes, or does that seem excessive?
I'd love to talk about your shoulder woes.
Let's hear what you got.
Yeah. If someone's more miserable than me, I'm all ears. I can't get enough.
I don't know, Brent, do you want to explain this scenario, or do you want me to do it?
Why don't you do it?
Correct all the things I got
It's your shoulder.
Basically, you have the shoulders of a 90-year-old.
That's the impression I'm getting. So I've had...
That sums it up pretty good.
Yeah, so I've had surgery for dislocations on both shoulders, and the more recent one has gotten... It seemed to me like it never really got full range of motion back after the last surgery.
How many times have you dislocated your shoulder?
I think they were each out 3 times before I had surgery. So it wasn't
3 times each.
It wasn't like chronic.
You know what your problem is? Your arms are too long. There's too much leverage.
I think you might be right, man.
Or you should be using, I'm going to give you 2 suggestions. One,
you need a shorter paddle, son.
195 centimeter paddle. That's suggestion A. B, stand-up paddleboarding. Just take it easy. I think that's what Brent's suggesting for all of us, really, that we should just be at home, taking it easy, not going out and putting our shoulders at risk. But all right, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to overrun your story here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so now I have pretty bad arthritis in my left shoulder, and it seems like the head of the humerus is starting to collapse, like maybe from a vascular necrosis. And so what once was a ball and socket joint is now sort of like a cube and socket.
What is it? What'd you call that? Something necrosis?
A vascular, where the blood flow to the bone dies. And Brent, please correct me as I'm butchering this. As the blood flow to the bone gets cut off and the bone dies, and then it can sort of collapse.
Is this what's happening, Brent?
Yeah, no, he's got it right. I mean, it doesn't. It's rare to have happen after the surgery that Lewis had. But either as a result of the surgery or maybe as a result of the dislocations, just sort of his bad luck from him. Essentially the bone needs blood just like anywhere else in the body, and if it doesn't get it, the bone will actually die. And once that happens, it falls apart, and that's what's going on in his shoulder.
That sounds awful.
How do you fix that?
Yeah.
Can he come see you at Georgetown?
Brent, how do we fix this?
Fix that up, or?
Well, so unfortunately, once it gets to what he's got, the only real option is a shoulder replacement.
Oh.
We could just put him down.
Once this Republican health bill makes it through, that's probably going to be the only option left.
So if you...
So wait, you can do a shoulder replacement, like a hip or a knee replacement. These things actually work, or what happens then? Because I know dudes who get like a knee replacement, and they're like they're doing backflips on a trampoline 4 hours later, basically. What are hip replacements or shoulder replacements as successful as these replacements seem to be, or hip replacements or whatever?
Hip replacements work great. Knee replacements work okay, pretty well in the right person, meaning they're really meant to get you so you can, somebody that can't walk at all, get them walking. Mm-hmm. The guy doing splits on the trampoline is probably not going to be real happy with this long term, and that's rare. And shoulder replacements are sort of along a similar vein, meaning, for people that have terrible pain and really can't do anything with them, they work great. When you start talking about younger people, young in this situation means sort of 40s and early 50s, we do worry about them wearing out over time. And they function, they're great for relieving pain. They function real well. They don't function like a normal shoulder. And so, the concept of high-level whitewater kayaking after one is something that Lewis may or may not explore whether or not it's possible. He may be the test case.
I'm thinking of the Seinfeld where the woman walks without moving her arms. Is that what Lewis will look like after the shoulder replacements?
No, I mean they work great. It's a great operation. They get people back functioning well. It's just a question of whether they can handle the load of high level kayaking.
So what's next, Lewis? What's the next step can you go out and paddle today, Lewis? What's up?
Yeah, I can paddle. I've lost so much range of motion that I feel like I just kind of suck. Like I feel like I just can't do everything I want to do in the boat, and I guess that's frustrating. And if I do too much, which is probably 50% of how much I would normally be paddling, it's like very painful. And I don't know, it seems like talking to Brent about it and talking to a surgeon out here in Portland, there's some options to maybe try to open up the labrum a little bit, just kind of loosen things up, just kind of clean up debris and scar tissue in there. And hopefully that'll give me some short-term relief. And maybe this like half shoulder replacement is in the cards a little further down the road, but hopefully something to push off for as long as possible, I guess.
We may have to do like a crowdsourcing funding to get a new shoulder for you, Lewis.
Right. We could probably raise $200-300.
Yeah, dude. We got 7 or 8 listeners.
Our listeners chipped in like $100
each. Man,
That'd be $300.
Man,
I do a weird thing now where I have no control over this. It's happening like it's like on a cellular level, where if I start falling over, like I start tipping over my boat, I won't reach out to brace anymore. I do this weird thing where my shoulder tucks, my elbow tucks into my stomach, and I kind of do this really wimpy looking low brace kind of thing, and I hang on it because I don't want to like reach out and push myself back up again. And I look like a complete Tauron when I do it. And I'm kind of ashamed of myself, and I'm hoping no one's looking at me, but I have no control over it anymore because my body would not let me reach out to like do like these big dynamic high braces I used to do. It's like an alert goes off.
Well, we got some viewer mail about that. So,
John Webb.
You sure you never hurt your shoulder, John?
No, I haven't. But something about my body's saying I'm not doing that. Nope, not going to happen.
So probably a good self-preservation instinct.
Yeah. Yeah, I did it last weekend. I was just like, oh my God, I look like an old man out here. Jesus.
So Brent,
you are an old man.
No, come on now.
So Brent, what's your? Are you doing like one surgery a week, 10 surgeries a week? What's a day in the life like of an orthopedic surgeon?
So I do somewhere between 5 and 8 surgeries in a week. Over about a day and a half, and then the rest of the time I'm seeing patients in the office. And so, people that we've operated on, people we're going to operate on, the vast majority of people I see, we actually can, I can make better without surgery. So a lot of times a combination of a cortisone injection and some physical therapy, or just some physical therapy.
What other, I'm sure you see some paddlers, but what other things are wearing people's shoulders out that you see out there?
So, the most common thing I see is just your regular run-of-the-mill, 50 to 70-year-old, really that just uses their arm for daily life. We see, I see a fair amount of the people, that you would think of. So, a lot of football players, see a fair number of baseball players, especially pitchers, and then The one group that really destroys their shoulders is weightlifters. And actually, there is a sport that's worse for shoulders than kayaking, and that's trampoline, or trampoline and trapeze.
Well, anyone who knows me knows I love the trapeze, so that's a problem.
There used to be a trapeze studio in downtown DC, and that was good for a whole lot of business.
Is that just because people are hanging? It just stretches everything out, or?
Yeah. I mean, you're supporting your whole body weight by your arm hanging up overhead. So if you think paddling's bad for it, trapeze is a whole lot worse.
So doing pull-ups is not a good idea, because I like doing pull-ups when I go to the gym.
No, pull-ups are great because you're not, it's a controlled load. You're not suspending yourself and then, bouncing up and down.
Yeah. So this
okay.
is
So
no,
let me ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
This is no joke. Literally, I go from military presses to pull-ups when I'm at the gym.
So let me ask you a question. The best. Okay, give a kayaker comes in with a shoulder injury of some sort. Give me an idea of who the worst kind of patient is and who's the best kind of patient. So we all know how to behave when we come into the surgeon for our shoulder problem.
In general, kayakers are actually, at least for me, pretty good patients, because the ones that seek me out a lot of times know that I have some paddling experience, and so I think it works well because you do have a limited amount of time, and we don't have to spend a whole lot of time with them trying to make me understand what they're doing, what they did, what they want to do. That conversation takes about 20 seconds. Versus I think with somebody that doesn't paddle, it takes a real long time. And in general, as long as they sort of listen and realize, when you tell them the time frame, how long it's going to take to get better, most of the paddlers I've taken care of are actually great patients, because they want to get better. They tend to be pretty fit, and you tell them what to do and they do it, as opposed to some of the other folks who will sort of look at you and you say, well, you got to do these exercises, and they look at you like, yeah, I don't really do those exercises, and then it just doesn't work. So the ones that aren't great patients are the ones that come in and you've seen their shoulder come out of place 5 or 10 times, and you say, look, you really ought to think about doing something about this, because it's just going to get worse. And then, they stick their head in the sand and they come back, and now they got a worse problem. And it just kind of keeps building on that.
So Lewis, basically Lewis, what you're saying.
No, Lewis is actually a pretty good patient. Although I will say, Lewis and I butted heads a little bit, and I did not operate on Lewis for any time.
I see.
But
I see.
We butted heads a little bit when he wanted to be back and doing everything he could about 2 weeks after surgery, in what was expected to be a 6-month recovery. So.
I thought I was pretty good most of the time.
So on a final note, can we, as a medical doctor, can you please explain to Lewis that he should not be chewing tobacco? Stop.
I think this is a great point.
That's better. It's better than smoking cigarettes.
See, that's not the strong answer that I'm
Wiesel
looking
is
for.
A glass half full kind of guy, I can tell you.
He does shoulders. What does he know?
You said you wanted to put him down, so this is
Can
one
you
way
get
to go
necrosis
about
of the lip and gum? Is that possible?
Although I will say, if you've ever seen somebody with, tongue cancer, either tongue or mouth cancer, which is what you get from chewing tobacco long term, you would probably rather be dead. I mean, it is when you end up getting that, it's terrible.
Okay.
So.
Well,
all right.
On a selfish note, before we let you go here, I broke my ribs 4 weeks ago, and it's kind of dragging on, Doc. What should I do here? Is there a way to speed
that
this
thing's
up?
gonna hurt? No, it's gonna hurt like hell. I mean, ribs are a good. Anytime you break a bone, you're gonna get some pain in that for between 9 and 12 months, and ribs typically hurt for a good 3 months. The good news with it is you can just ignore them. If you can tolerate it, you're not gonna make it worse.
That is
Man
not,
up.
not what I wanted to hear.
Or woman up, I should say.
No military presses.
It's really tough.
I'm not, doctor, this is not what I wanted to hear.
Bad patient.
Well,
Bad patient.
thank you so much for coming on the Hammer Factor.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.
Dr. Wiesel. Thanks for lining this one up, John Weld. Good one. This was
my
a,
pleasure.
This was a
No,
very
it
good
was
interview.
Gelman's idea. It was a good one. I think there was lots to be learned here for us paddlers out there.
Oh.
Well, happy talking to you. I like the show you guys are doing. Actually, one of Lewis's friends, Neil Schott, introduced me to this, and you guys are entertaining. It's just good entertainment in the car.
Well, thank you.
There we go.
Thanks, man.
So,
All right, thanks, Brent.
so keep
Cheers, man.
Keep it up.
Later.
Take care. All right. Bye.
Well, there we go. We've learned a tremendous amount of far-ranging subjects, from shoulders to trapeze to Lewis's impending mouth and shoulder cancer.
9 to 12 months, I'm going to fill these ribs. That is not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah, that sucks.
At least you don't need a rib replacement.
I feel like just ending the show now. I was going to go into viewer mail and whatever, but
You're just going to go sit in the bathroom with the lights out?
yeah. I mean, my
Bad beats all around.
My stomach's all queasy from talking about shoulders popping out. And then, anyway, that was awesome. Great interview.
Yeah, that was cool.
Okay, little viewer mail.
Do it.
As always, we love our viewer mail. We had some really good viewer mail this time. We do every time, but we had a bunch of good stuff. Let's get right into this one. Go ahead.
Well, okay, first of all, we should think of some way of summing this up, because we threw out the question about Jackson kayaks last week, and we got a tremendous response.
We did.
All over the
What was
map.
the
Is there a
question?
way... What's that?
What was the question?
That's right, you weren't here.
Yeah, the question was really, why is there such a love-hate relationship with Jackson kayaks and
In play boating.
play
There seems to
boating?
be in play boating, and are they intertwined? We had Dane was on briefly, and I don't know that he necessarily addressed the question specifically, but towards the end of the podcast, we threw that out there, and we had a ton of people write back as to what they thought was the dynamic with paddlers and EJ and play boating and Jackson.
And there was some a lot of these responses are probably 500 words. I can't read them. I mean, how do you sum them up? I mean, what do you say?
Well, we asked for this, so we have to think of some way of summing it up, right? What was the general theme? Was there one theme that we could pick out from this?
The one.
Were there Jackson defenders? Were there Jackson haters? How did it stand?
Most of them weren't really taking a side. They were just putting their 2 cents in as to the way it looked. And I would say the consensus was the Jackson brand is like the Yankees. They're on top. They have the biggest budget. They buy the best athletes. And you either love the Yankees or you hate the Yankees. You want to see the Yankees win the World Series, or you want every other team to beat the Yankees. So I think just looking through this, that's the best summary I got. Does that make any sense?
Geltman, what do you think of that? He's not buying it. That's the look we're getting right now. I'm not buying it look.
Well, what's your opinion, Lewis? You missed this whole thing. Now you're in the hot seat, my man.
My opinion on play boating or Jackson kayaks?
I'm trying to think of we're framing the question as to why, yeah.
Animosity is the wrong word, but why is there this, oh, you're a play boater, and then...
Why the hate on play boating?
Yeah.
And then is EJ, and there seems to be an anti-Jackson sentiment floating around. Is that tied in with play boating somehow, or is that just...
I think play boating kind of split between like big wave play boating, which is not really accessible to most people if, because of skill or because of geography or both, and small hole play boating, which seems comparatively lame. And, even among the play boaters, the guys who are, out crushing it in Quebec in the spring look at the guys play boating and at NOC or something and sort of, maybe not at them personally, but at that activity and sort of roll their eyes. And it's this thing that it's very separate from paddling on big whitewater, which is, I think, what most people find to be the most compelling. And when people go too far down that rabbit hole, it becomes an activity that people look at in the same way that they look at SUP. It's not really kayaking. It's some other activity that's sort of has some things in common, but it's not, in fact, it.
So what's up with Jackson then? Because we're getting people who are posting, I'm not going to mention his name, but posting videos, extended rants on Jackson kayaks at Walmart parking lots in front of trucks.
Just
And
one long gay joke.
But he's tapping into a vein that, a vein that's out there, a sentiment that's out there. And I think we should wrap this up because we spent enough time talking this discussion.
Yeah, I don't really want to. I think I'll keep my thoughts to myself on this one.
Well, anyway, a lot of really good responses. They're all, they're so in depth. They're hard to read on the air here. But that's my summary. It's.
We had one. Who was the guy that wrote the really long email? I think he should get a mention because he put a lot of time and thought into this issue.
Maybe we should have like a Hammer Factor message board where people can debate our pronouncements from up on high.
That'd be good if we have really long threads. We'll bring those up.
Like no, John Weld said.
Hat tip to Billy Carson. Billy Carson had a really
Billy Carson. That was the guy. Yeah.
Long email.
He was the guy that came up with the Yankees analogy. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on.
Yeah.
Here we go. This comes at us from Andrew. He says, "Will we ever see carbon kayaks in widespread use for extreme racing? And how long do you think we will be using rotomolded plastic in boats? P.S. The Potomac references are the only reason I listen to the show. Thanks, Andrew." Fellas?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think you could build a composite kayak that would withstand the rigors of creek boating, but it would probably cost $4,000 or $5,000. And until there are people around willing to pay for something like that, it's not going to happen.
I think something's going to happen with thermoforming that's going to not be an iteration in terms of boat improvement, but it'll be a big step, evolutionary step up. I think we're going to see boats that are coming in much more rigid, much more composite-like in their performance and weight, with a similar strength. I'm not sure. I don't have a timeline on that, but I think Liquid Logic's certainly knocking on that door. The problem is there's just so little money for kayaking specific industries to do that type of R&D, and that's going to have to come from another industry.
Yeah. And you nailed it right there.
Aerospace or something.
You nailed it. There's, the incentive for what you got to spend on the R&D to get that done. Is it going to pay off? I mean, I guess if you could just have it for 20 years, but you know what I mean? And like Shane said a long time ago, issue number 4, or whenever we had Shane on, rotomolded kayaks are good.
Yeah.
It's a good material.
I mean, I've been around for a number of years, and when I first started paddling, all we had was glass boats. And I'll be honest, man. I mean, there was some nice things about them, but by and large, they're a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, you could go out paddling for the weekend and break your boat the first hour of the first day, and you had to deal with that for the rest of the trip. You know what I mean? It sucked. So,
it seems like there's been some advances in composites since then, though. Like you could build a boat with like a urester resin or like a urethane resin, and if you're building a one-piece mold, like one-piece boats with a bladder, so that you didn't have to deal with the seaming issue.
Yeah, well, the problem is it's going to be those things are going to be cost.
Exactly. Yeah, totally.
And there's no company can make a go of making $4,000 and $5,000 boats. That's just not economically possible.
I think everybody wants a lighter boat, but nobody wants a more fragile boat. So
yeah, I agree with that.
That's right. That's why it's going to have to be. I think it's going to have to be thermoforming because that's the right price point too.
Okay, moving on. This one comes at us. Hat tip to our buddy Jeff Calhoun. He says, "I'm just catching up on old episodes." And then he goes right into, "I'm a big proponent of the Washington Tuck. I don't consider myself a great or frequent waterfall runner, but it's really worked for me. I had to train myself and practice a little bit, but it quickly became second nature, and I think it's really the way to go for most big drops. The arm position is way tighter, more comfortable, and less exposed. Better for shoulders, hands, wrists, etc. Galen also has it dialed. There's a million things I'd love to chat with you guys about, but that's one that I think deserves some explanation."
We should have asked Brent what he thinks about the Washington tuck versus the Oregon tuck
I
in an
know.
orthopedic.
That would have been a
from an
good
orthopedic
conversation.
standpoint.
Do you think we can? Yeah. Do you think it's even possible to explain the Washington tuck in audio only form?
Let me try.
Yeah.
All right. So the standard Oregon tuck is
For the record, this is when you run big waterfalls, keep the paddle from blasting you in the face, or doing something else, or breaking, or doing something else other untoward as you land.
this is when you're planning on plugging. You're trying to go deep. You don't want any kind of boof or anything like that. So this is straight down. And this is a way, the kind of the concept is what you do with your paddle and what do you do from your body from getting the air knocked, just getting knocked back. So the Oregon tuck is you put your paddle, you cross your front arm beside
It's basically like you're setting up to roll.
Basically like you're getting in a roll position and you're tucking as far forward as you can, putting your head down, trying to be as streamlined as possible and dive in. The Washington tuck is you're penciling in, you've got your direction, everything feels good, and then you're taking your paddle. Oh man, how do you explain that?
It's hard. So you
take your.
It's like from the normal Oregon tuck, you take what would be your front arm and pull it all the way down so it's like next to your waist. So it's like internally rotated and down, and then your backhand you switch your grip and bring it over and grab in front of that hand, like right behind the throw of your paddle.
So you have a lot of paddle behind you, and you have both hands holding near the front blade.
So
of the
instead
paddle
of having and so like instead of your front shoulder being up and over your head in the position where it's most likely to dislocate, it's internally rotated and against your stomach, which is the position where it's the least likely to dislocate. And
Is that Todd Wells who came up with that?
It was actually Todd Gilman.
Oh, Todd Gilman, that's who it was. Yeah.
He,
it was a Todd.
I don't know if he ever did it. He just talked about it. He just like had this idea, and we were talking about it one day. And then I would say the first person I saw actually doing it was Nate Klema, and he was just messing around doing it on like Wishbone on the Little White, and it sort of took off from there. And I would say that Galen probably is its easiest practitioner at the moment.
Have you ever done it, Lewis?
I haven't. It's hard for me to it's hard to get a tight tuck. Like your arm is kind of blocking where you want to lean forward, and like your cockpit rim kind of gets in the way of your forearm. Like it seems like it's harder than you think it is.
Yeah, I've never.
But I also I don't really run big drops either. So
I do the Burning Man.
That's a classic.
Just both hands over my head. I'll tell you something Dave Fuseli does, has been talking about, which I actually I can see what he's talking about, where he does he likes to peel out right above a big drop. So as he's approaching the lip, if he's coming in from the river left, the drop will be on his left side as he peels out, and he's looking over the lip. And as he peels out, he runs it just as he's finishing the peel out. But I like it because you could get a draw stroke in. And sort of bring your nose into that draw stroke, could be a manipulating stroke, and then help set the angle as you go in. I don't know. It just seems to ring true for me. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you. I don't know. I want to try the Washington tuck sometime with my ribs heal up. I'm gonna go find a waterfall and try that one a few times.
What's the tallest waterfall you've ever run, Grace?
Probably
you've run 70 footers before.
80 feet, yeah. 70, 80 feet, something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I'd say 50. 50 is as high as I'll go, period.
Until you go higher.
Yeah.
I always used to say that too. 30 foot, that's it. 40 foot, that's it. Okay.
All right. We have one more, don't we?
We do have
Andre
one more
Spino-Smith.
From Andre Spino-Smith. This is a good one.
Dr. Dre.
Yeah, Dr. Dre. Where is that one? Okay. Now I'm going to this is a longer one. Big hat tip to Andre for sending in these links and this email. So he says, Mr. Grace, it's been forever. Hope you're doing well. He says, at one point I had the opportunity to paddle with the Canadian flatwater racing team. He thought, in summary, he knew how to do a forward stroke, but then he had a chance to go and work out with the flatwater team. What's interesting to me is there's this whole wealth of knowledge out there about the forward stroke. Yet no one in whitewater is looking at, as far as he knows, the flatwater crowd. He says that I just watched an hour-long video of 7-time world champion talk about the forward stroke, and can now say with certainty that my technique has always been fairly poor. Could a flatwater racer become one of the best whitewater racers? Probably not, since whitewater is too nuanced to pick up quickly, but send one of the best whitewater racers to train with a flatwater team for a few months, and my theory is they would gain an absolute massive advantage. What do you guys
So I
think
have
about
two
that?
things to say about that. One is, it's a different forward stroke, because when you're using the wing blade, like, ideal technique for using the wing is like totally different than for using a non-blade. But that said, doesn't Fisher have a flatwater sprint background?
If you're from South Africa,
Yeah.
probably paddled sprint at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
And
that's like
Andrew McEwen raced sprint for a while, like a long time. Like the guys who race wildwater seriously draw a lot of inspiration on forward stroke stuff from the guys who race flatwater sprint. And I mean, if you want to see how fast Andrew is, like, go out to the cheat race this weekend and like watch him disappear into the horizon in front of you.
he'll give you dot-itis, as we used to call it. It'd be like a little dot on the horizon. Here's the thing, right? Is when I used to train wildwater, I was there right when we made the transition from regular paddles to wing paddles. And as Gelman says, the wing dictates that the wing only functions if you use it a certain way, and it basically, it's like the way that Greg Barton explains it is it's like you're grabbing hold of a vertical street sign in front of you and pulling yourself past it, and then as the paddle passes your hip, the wing wants to fly out to the side. That's just the way it kind of goes. And the wing doesn't work at all unless you do that. You just can't do that in a whitewater boat. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is when I talk kayaking, and I talk kayaking for forever, I was always hesitant to get into the forward stroke with most of my students, because 90% of my students' problems was control strokes in terms of doing sort of micro stern draws as you're paddling down the river to keep their boat going straight. And even good whitewater paddlers, and you guys do the same thing and probably even know it, it seems like about half of your forward stroke in whitewater is doing little micro adjustments to keep your boat going in the right direction. Sweeping out, pulling in with a stern draw, doing a little bit of a bow draw as you begin the forward stroke. It's really hard to isolate a perfect forward stroke in a whitewater boat. And also, you start looking at people like Shipley, who traditionally has a terrible forward stroke. Shipley was one of our country's best slalom racers. Or you look at the Martin Gickler, who was the whitewater paddler from Germany, who was the fastest whitewater paddler in the world for many years, had a terrible forward stroke by every classical standards, but they were super fast because they had a style of forward stroke that worked well for their physique and their body and their training type or whatever, But I think what you get from flatwater training, which these extreme racers don't have, is a sense of discipline. You go out there with the flatwater paddlers and you say, holy shit, if I really work hard 4 or 5 hours a day, 6 days a week, I'm going to get fast as shit. I think that's the lesson we learned from flatwater paddling.
I don't know, man. I'm kind of in disagreement. I feel like people, I think that your point about you're splitting hairs about these guys not having great forward strokes. I mean, you show me one whitewater paddler who has a forward stroke like as good as Scott Shipley's or Marcus Gickler's. It's like they might not have it compared to the.
I mean, you've seen Gickler paddle. I mean,
ideal,
it's laughable. His elbows are like hitting the down along the cockpit of his boat.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about making adjustments for your physique and everything else is sound, but like those guys are. I mean, you're talking about the difference between being like somebody with like a 98th percentile forward stroke and like a 99.9th percentile forward stroke, and for most people who are just getting started in kayaking, I think that it's an extremely something that people give nowhere near enough attention to. I think that having a sound forward stroke is super important.
I tell you what I do notice is I can usually spot someone to learn how to paddle when they're younger than like 13 or 14. They always look different in the water. And there's no common thread of technique, but they have a fluidity that's different than someone who learned later in life.
Yeah, it seems plausible.
My take on this is that I think going out and doing flat water is you're going to learn things about your stroke that you're not necessarily going to pay attention to if you're on the river all the time, and that's a good thing. But it's just like, I liken it to trail running versus running on the track. When you're running on the track, you're focused on this stride and this rhythm and whatnot. But when you're running in the trail's dictating your pace and dictating where you place your paddle. And I think it's the same thing as flat water versus whitewater. I mean, you could have the greatest stroke in the world, but if you don't have timing and know where to put your paddle, it's not going to help you.
I just think I think a good forward stroke is one element of whitewater paddling, but it's not the element of paddling like it is in flat water.
I'll agree with you.
I mean,
100%.
Yeah, I agree. I just think that
boat trajectory through a rapid, like a good paddler, you'll see even the mediocre forward stroke will enter a class 4 rapid, and as they go through like a complicated eddy line back into current through another eddy line as they approach like a crux move, they're doing a smooth stroke the entire way because they're reading their ability to read the trajectory of their boat through variable currents. Mm-hmm. That's where you see tremendous skill in paddling, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To me, that's the most obvious feature of a good paddler. The forward stroke usually falls by it's there, but it's not that.
Now, that's not to say you don't need the important elements of a good catch and, decent posture. And it's not that you can throw all that out the window, but, I think that there's a point to where the technique itself is not going to help you that much. It's like back in the wrestling days, you could have the greatest technique for a single leg takedown and whatever, but if you didn't just take the other guy down, it wasn't going to help. You got to just make that boof, or you just got to make that turn. I think you just got to do it.
I was wondering when you were going to get wrestling involved with this podcast. It took 22 episodes, but here it is.
Well, now that I can't talk about sup anymore, I mean, Jesus.
Cat's out of the bag.
All right, guys, we are over time. Rants and raves.
Yeah.
Rants and raves are our favorite section of the show. Everyone, rants and raves. John Weld, you're first.
Yeah. I got one, and I'm ready to rant, baby. I'm telling you right now. I'm telling this is an open statement to boat designers out there. Get your act together in terms of designing cockpit rims. You guys are out of your friggin' minds with these cockpit rims. And we had a boat designer, I'm not mentioning any names, but I will give you a clue. He's been on this show. Throw out a cockpit rim that there is no skirt that you can get to fit that rim. There's no skirt. Every skirt you get, every time you get that boat, you're going to have a skirt custom made for that boat. It's like designing a toaster, a beautiful piece of art toaster with a plug with 1 prong. Or 6 prongs, or 20 prongs. It doesn't plug into anything. It's non-functioning. You have to build your own custom socket for this toaster you built. Okay, I'm going to keep it real simple, boys and gals out there designing boats. You need 2 sizes, an 88-inch rim and a 92-inch rim. That's it. Period. You don't need 84, 97, 99, 82, 75. You don't need any of those. You need 88 and 92. Everyone could be happy with those rims. And I will send you a tracing of the correct way to make that rim so the boat's dry. Because I'm sick of designers designing these things. I'm sick of customers calling me saying their boat leaks when their rim's a turd.
Bam.
Period.
Bam. That's the
rant,
best
boys.
rant we've ever
That's
had
a
on
rant
this show.
Right there.
Woo!
Cut it out.
I like it. I like it.
No reason for it. All right. What do you got? Bring the heat.
Lewis?
I'm going to rave about Alaska Airlines. Man, they fly direct to DC from Portland, like only airline that does that. I was about to, I had to sit next to this like poor woman who is just so obese when I was going home last week. And like the stewardess pulled me aside, like very like discreetly, and was like, I'm really sorry. Like, there's nowhere else we can put you. Like, here's like 5,000 frequent flyer miles. I got like bumped to first class on the way home.
See?
They will take a kayak if you show up at Alaska Airlines. They will take your kayak. They're like, oh, a kayak, $75. Done. Like, that is so rare now.
Right.
It's like, yeah. Alaska
you can carry like a moose rifle on board.
Yes. You probably carry a moose rifle on. You might want to double check on that. Nobody tased me or dragged me off the plane screaming. Very pleasant.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm glad. What was I? Oh, I'm going to rave. This one's a little off topic here, but I'm going to rave about female business leaders.
Thank you.
So I have had the opportunity to work with some outstanding female business leaders, and boys, they're just more cunning than you are. That's all I can say.
I will tell anybody that there'd be no IR without Kara. It'd just be IR would be a bunch of dudes blowing stuff up, making dick jokes. If it weren't for Kara, that's all we would be.
Sewing up sweatpants.
That's right. I'd be like, look, we made a potato cannon. What do you mean we're broke?
Hold my beer. Well, big props to the other female captains of industry out there. And I think that's a wrap for the Hammer Factor. 22's in the books.
All right. Excellent.